I want to hear you. Oh, I know you want it.
Where's Mrs. LaCharles?
She is helping run a book fair at Mary Rollins tonight.
Oh,
How are you?
that's fun. Spread too thin, right?
Well, hello, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
Do you know what
The last meeting was the week of the
Oh. Nobody, I wasn't, I forget why.
I couldn't do it.
That's crazy.
I still have it on my to-do list.
That's okay. I know Richard's talking to him too, so.
All right, so welcome everybody. Sorry I missed the last meeting. I was glad it went on. So first item is the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at those?
Actually, I admit I didn't.
Okay.
Well.
All right, you want to wait?
I don't even remember. It's been so long. Did you guys?
Can you put them
I
up
can put them
there?
up there,
Oh,
yes.
perfect.
They're very brief.
Brief, yeah. All right. While I'm doing that, do you want to go ahead and start on your piece?
Okay.
Since that's an exciting piece of work.
Um,
Hi, Jody.
So this is
Hi, Jody.
The result of a deep dive that we talked about doing on the scheduling of science labs. And what I'm bringing back to the committee is what I've learned. I will have you know that this handout is entirely Jody Speck's work and not mine.
Oh, so we know there's no errors on it then.
Yeah, good thing.
So having given you a chance to do that, I will now collect them.
There's a 6 credit course.
Oh, so you're gonna
Yes.
take us through this?
I know.
Oh, wow.
Physics classes.
Yeah, we
Where did
don't
that
have
stuff-
6 credits.
No, actually, we're not gonna go through this in detail, at least that was not my intent. This is a supporting document. So I met with Perry and Jody several weeks ago, and we talked about how scheduling is set up, how it gets modified, how much is done by the computer, how much is done by Perry and Jody and other people. And basically, the process is, there's a list of courses that are set before the students. They pick which courses the teachers make recommendations. There's some back and forth between the students and the guidance about getting overrides and things like that. But as far as the science classroom is concerned, or for the whole school, the computer pretty much does all the scheduling. The computer does 95% of all the scheduling. And the trade-offs are as follows. A 4-credit course meets every day. A 5-credit course meets every day and has a lab every 4th day, a second period every 4th day. A 6-credit course meets every day, but has a second period of lab every other day. Right? So if you're in a 5-day week, you may have 8 lab periods. Or 8 science periods if you're taking a 6-credit course, because 3 of them are going to be double periods.
Is that representative?
Pardon me?
Is that representative somehow?
This is the current schedule.
So that's a 6-credit course.
Mhm.
That's a 5-credit course.
Got it. Okay.
So, for example, if you look at room 107 here, you can see that blocks A and B are Physics 9 with a lab every other day. And right below that in rows C and D is a physics course that's a 5-credit course in that it has a lab, a second period for every 4th day. And down at the bottom in G is a 4-credit physics course, which just meets 1 period every day.
So is this what it is this year?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's the 8 credit.
And then there's the what?
APs with 8 credits.
Okay.
So like on the bottom right-hand corner, room 172.
Okay,
AP biology is a double period.
right, so rows A and B and rows E and F in room 172 are eight periods. So basically, they've got a double period every day.
So is this the one, so is the 8 credit the one where we can't accommodate all the kids?
I think it's a 6 credit.
Okay.
5 credits.
I'm sorry, it was a 5 credit. Yeah.
So the 5 credit one is the one where we're having trouble
Yeah.
placing everybody?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. I had.
5 credit courses, not everyone who requested a 5 credit course got a 5 credit course. In some cases, we put them into a 4 credit course instead of a 5 credit course. So of course, it does not have the extra lab every 4 days.
Could they have gone to the 6? Just out of
No, it's a
curiosity.
different subject.
Well, all right.
So we offer 5 credit chemistries and 5 credit biologies, but we don't offer 6 credit chemistries or biologies. The 6 credits are only in physics, and the double periods are only AP biology and AP chemistry.
Okay.
Anatomy used to be 5 credits, but it has been 4 credits for the last couple of years.
Is that an issue? Anatomy not having 5 credits?
Probably if
Yes,
you ask the
yes, it
anatomy
is.
teacher.
Well, I don't know how important it is to going forward.
Well, there's another thing I hope to go over tonight, which is another interim report, which I lay out which science courses kids are being denied and the extent of how big that is for different courses. And I do make the point that everyone who can't get into a 5 credit is offered the 4 credit of the same. But
Am I jumping you ahead?
no, it's appropriate, it's just, I've got the detail written down in another document that I don't have in front of me.
Here, you want to look at it? I brought it.
Sure.
Is that
Well, never mind. I didn't want to get, no, I have it here, I just didn't want to get distracted with it,
Sorry.
jumping back and
But
forth
for
here.
example, to jump right into the AP 8 credit versus 4 credit, for example, with chemistry, I would say that's the biggest problem, because if you're like mostly a honors type of kid but decide not to take AP chemistry, the logical thing would be to take a 5 credit accelerated chemistry. And you can't, because in all likelihood, all your singletons other than that would conflict. And they can't offer an accelerated 5 credit at the same time as the 4 credit because they could. And all that stuff. So a kid who's like a math science kid, but decides that AP chemistry is too much, kind of gets double screwed because they can only take a 4 credit accelerated that runs the same period.
And all of this is some kids. Works out beautifully for some kids. And some years are different than other years. The schedule is live being, you know, so anything we look at for numbers is going to be one snapshot in time, which will be different this year when we go into scheduling.
But it's also indicative of the scheduling issues and, you know.
And all we can look at is a snapshot,
Yeah.
so. It's not that it's not valid, it's just that it's not definitive, because
So, I guess the question that I have
Sending it
is,
down now.
are you seeing a trend of some sort? 'Cause seriously, I've never heard of an 8 credit course in science. And I hate
Trova has always
I
had,
heard 5, but 8 I've never heard, which is fine. What I'm wondering is, because
Do you mean 8 or do you mean 6?
I thought 5 was the most we ever did. I did not know there was a 6 or an 8, but what I want to ask, and it might be a different subject, is, are you seeing a trend? Because, I mean, we talked earlier about the trending is going away from just the STEM stuff, and we're doing seeing a lot more STEAM stuff. So, because the arts are actually generating a lot of the stuff. Are we seeing a push for more of this, or is this just the same type of problem that's kind of cyclical and fluctuates, and it's always been a problem, but this is what's happening? That there's not a higher demand for 8 credit courses or a higher demand for,
measure it with our increased population.
so it's just the population that's
Yeah.
doing it, it's not the,
Right, no, I don't see a big explosion.
Okay.
when I got here with 750 kids, there might be one AP chemistry course. Now there's two, but we have 1,100 kids in the building, so that makes sense.
Yes.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but one trend is from more 5-credit courses, which offer an extra lab every 4th day, to fewer 5-credit courses and more 4-credit courses. In other words,
So a kid will opt out of the 5 and go to 4?
we won't be able to offer as many 5-credit classes.
Is it the demand or is it the spacing?
So I would say that it is both a function of human resource available, because when you teach a 5-credit course, you're teaching more. So, you know, you're still teaching one course, but it takes up more of your 5 possible sections.
Yep.
And now increasing, so I would say historically, that's probably been more of a personnel issue. It is now starting to become also a room issue. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, but I would also add that in some regards, the requests are moving towards 4 credits because kids they want to take a computer science course. They want to take a theater arts course.
Yep.
That makes it possible to understand.
And we didn't used to have all of those options, so there are more kids making trade-offs in their schedule. So which came first, I don't, you know.
Well, if I understand NEASC, they want the kids to have the options. And they're opting for the 4 credit. So does the 4 credit make it more difficult to schedule? I would think it'd be easier.
4 credit is easier to schedule.
Yeah.
5 credit is more challenging to schedule.
So kids who like science, kids who think they want to major anywhere in science, kids who enjoy doing the labs, kids who do better on labs than they do on tests. All these kids should be looking at the 5 credit.
But there's a
Science.
huge, but there's been enough of a trend to go to the 4 credit that you're actually going to notice it. Because I'm back to really, so I'm just.
Could I go into some of the detail I collected here?
Yep.
So in the current school year, 22 students were denied the opportunity to take the 5-credit AP biology course because only one section of the course could be accommodated. That's basically.
Not AP Bio, accelerated Bio, not AP Bio.
Accelerated bio?
Yeah.
Okay.
All the AP Bio students were accommodated.
Accelerated bio. But that's a 5-credit course.
Correct.
Accelerated bio. Okay. 6 college preparatory students were turned away from the 5-credit honors biology course. 17 students.
Oh.
No?
You said 6 students, what was it?
We're from the 5
It would have
credit
been
college prep.
CP. It would have been, yeah, it would have been college prep, so.
We're
if it was-
denied CP biology.
So it wouldn't be honors biology, it would be 5-credit college prep biology.
Okay. That's fine. That was 5-credit, okay, and 17 students were turned away from the college prep chemistry course.
5-credit?
Yes. Anatomy and physiology courses used to be 5-credit courses, and they're now 4-credit courses.
Is that because of demand?
It's only been 4 credits since I've been there, so I would imagine that it was combinations of things.
A mix.
And so, again, I want to make a point that if a student didn't get into the 5-credit course that they wanted to, they were offered the chance to get into the 4-credit course, or one step down. What I came away with, the impression is that, and I think this illustrates it very well, is that the rooms are fully booked. Right? And the range and breadth of the science courses has increased over the past few years. So if you've got the same limited space, but you're going to offer more variety or more depth, you can't offer the things you used to. You can't offer as many. You're going to sacrifice 5-credit courses to put in 4-credit courses. And it's going to be, so what I took away from it is that the science labs are full. You can't put back a 5-credit course or a 6-credit course or an 8-credit course without severely cutting some other course out of the mix.
But is there need for the 8 and 6 credit courses?
Well,
And I know that varies based on the year.
you know, it's the chicken and the egg, right? Recently, I've got kids in high school, and when they went in, there were a whole bunch of kids who wanted to go out for soccer, and they got cut because there was no freshman soccer team. The next year, very few 8th graders went out for soccer because they thought there was no freshman soccer team, and you're going to get cut anyway, so why bother? The thing is, that year the school had budgeted for a soccer team. And then the year after, when the 8th graders came in and they saw that they could be accommodated, there was an uptick in kids trying out for soccer again. So, how many kids say, if you don't present them the option, again, it's the chicken and the egg, but even if you decide that there's another kind of science course that's worth adding to the curriculum, you've no place to put it unless you cut something else out. So do you turn around and say, I'm not going to do that? And so my summary is that,
Just to interrupt a little bit,
Yep.
keep in mind, the next 25 kids means one more science class has to fit in here.
That's right.
Which will be this year, next year.
Yeah.
We'll have another 25 kids, and probably the year after, we'll have another 25 kids.
That's why, Perry, you've been saying next year's gonna be interesting.
What 25 kids are we talking about? School choice?
No, just
What's the
enrollment.
No, enrollment.
It's increased by 25, okay.
Well, we don't know if it will go up by 25,
This is
that's a
specs.
back of the envelope calculation that we went up 40 or 50 this year.
Well, we could two extra classrooms. We hope.
so,
We got science labs.
So,
Is it fair to say, though, that
They need, these are specialized, I know, but these are specialized rooms. These are,
How many of these science labs actually need gas, electricity?
well, they do, every one of these is a lab.
So they
classroom.
actually need,
Every one of them has the burners, has the labs, there's, I think, limited rooms with hoods and ventilation for kind of the high-end chemistry stuff. But
well, I'm wondering, engineering in the future, they don't really need all that stuff, do they?
that's not in this kind of science lab, that's in the shop.
Oh, really?
those are scheduled in our wood shop.
So those are considered science?
Yes, it is considered a science class, but because it doesn't do
Doesn't need
the
those
same sorts of labs.
facilities.
Are you seeing an uptake in those kind of classes? No?
What's our topic, the robotics?
That's really nice.
Just engineering to the future.
so the
I'm sorry.
I don't think there's any significant changes to be made to the scheduling. I think the teachers and administrators are making the trade-offs that they see satisfying the most amount of students. And as it sits right now, the science labs are, requests exceed ability to satisfy the requests. We immediately need at least one more science lab to satisfy the requests we had this year for courses.
So that's this year.
Yes.
That, see, we still need to know what the.
Okay, so, and I go into this a little bit more in the other document, but basically the other thing that will drive demand is your enrollment going to increase and you're going to offer the same classes, or are you going to expand the variety of classes that you offer? That would also drive the need for more science lab space, neither of which we know as we sit here today.
So you folks aren't, have you had, I'm not asking you to predict the future, but have you had interest, requests, or things that you think may be valuable in the sciences that you'd like to add additional classes?
So proposed for next year, we had 2 classes this year that are combination English science that we offered to seniors. One was epidemiology, so it's a double period one period taught by an English teacher, one period taught by a science teacher, and then maritime science, which you see here in room 166. So we have, those are semester-long classes. We have a proposed for another similar class, bioethics, for next year, same sort of thing. For seniors, it would be a one-semester class.
What was that?
Bioethics.
So is that law and science?
So, I don't know how, it might get into a little bit of law. In fact, I'm sure they will get into some law, but it's,
So do they get a science credit for
the
that?
ethical, I'll give you an example. So, I was talking to, it's not the AP bio teacher, David Form, who will be teaching this class, but he and I were having a conversation, and he was telling me about some new way they have where you can go in and on a person, you can splice genes on a living person and actually change mutation. You can make mutations to a person that then can potentially be passed on to their children. So what are the ethical ramifications of being able to go and make changes to somebody's
That's a great
existing
class.
genetic code?
They do that to flowers.
So apparently they can do it to people now, which freaked me out a little bit.
And there's
So here's my question.
very good literature.
Are
on
they
it.
actually going to be doing, I mean, they're going to learn about it, but they're not actually going to do splicing, are they?
No.
So do they really, do they? So would these?
Imagine that permission slip.
So they will, I am sure, I don't know enough about the proposed syllabus to go into too much depth, but they will have labs associated with it. So they will have some types of,
Well, like my
labs
son has
might
got a
not be
lab where
actually going
he
to
can
do
actually
gene
make
therapy.
DNA from.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But he doesn't need electricity. He's got a little lab, just kind of sits there, he's a little pot of water. These 3 classes, do they need to have all of, the gas, the water, and all that electricity? Could they go into those modules?
For some of the things they do, yes. For some of the labs they do. I mean, they do labs that involve a fair amount of water. For example, maritime science, I know they were doing a lab just recently where they were looking at water layers. And so you need access to water, you need sinks. So, and they don't do the same types of chemical labs that
Right.
you would be doing necessarily in a chemistry class, but they do a fair number of labs. There's classes too that require access to that kind of stuff.
So they need more water than make a 5-gallon dispenser. Just
They told me that.
I'm thinking
Well,
it's a
and I
great
think-
space.
And I think as soon as you bring any chemical in to a lab, there's science standards all
The
around.
disposal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these 3 classes are classes that you want to add next year?
Well, 2 of them we already have. The bioethics is new, that's a semester-long class, and then there was another one too.
The genome one?
Yes,
Forensics.
it was forensics is new, but that's
Forensics is new
reflected.
this year.
That's reflected in here.
But like maritime
But there's,
studies.
what's the genome class? That they formed?
Personalized DNA and personalized medicine,
I think that's what it was.
or the
Which is a-
human genome and personalized medicine.
That's a
That's
semester
current?
class, no, that we would like to be able to offer.
Yeah.
So it is being offered.
what?
Personalized medicine, so it's really, it's he gears off a lot of the work that universities are doing with the human DNA strand and the ways that they're looking at different diseases and how your body is processing things, and the kids are getting in there and working with real live research. He's,
Is that Dr. Form?
yes.
My son was talking about that he was really jazzed about it.
He does
He-
funky stuff.
So are
David
these-
does, yeah.
So are these classes being offered to be different, or are they being offered because you're seeing an interest from the kids in a direction that they want to go in?
Both. I mean, we are.
Who's driving it?
Part of the
teachers or
attempt,
the students?
it depends. It's both. Sometimes it's, a teacher has an interest, and, I mean, forensic science is something that I think kids were interested in, but Corey Cressman, who's offering the classes, it was an interest of hers,
Right.
and kids signed up for it in droves, so it was
Okay.
something that, once offered, the kids were really excited about. Part of it also is trying to, as much as possible, connect the work that we're doing in the school to stuff that's actually going on outside of the building. So in something like that, genes of personalized medicine, we'll see if we have enough kids to sign up to take it, but, they're learning about research that's being done right now. That's pretty exciting stuff to be able to
Right.
take with you into college.
And another course was molecular gastronomy, the art and science of cooking, where they're growing molds and they're doing
I ate some of
science.
some of the stuff that they did.
The mold?
It wasn't mold, no, it was some sort of gelatinous stuff.
That's this year though, right?
That's this year, correct, we are offering.
And that's in the
That's
food-
not in the.
That's in the food term.
Right, but that's not in here.
That's in the foods room. But the foods room has all that disposal, water, storage, all that stuff.
So is the foods room booked all day?
All day.
Okay.
Probably free
So-
period.
Well, that's basically what I have to offer about the science labs. It's not a situation where first the science labs get scheduled and then everything else gets scheduled around them. That's just not the way it's done. It's all done through the Pearson Power School stuff. Perry and Jody make adjustments to the room assignments after the schedule comes out.
And department heads as well. So
Department
Linda
head.
Pierre, the science department head, looked at what the initial room assignments were and helped me figure out how to jigsaw different things.
But as you, again, so the main point of this is to show you that the rooms are booked. If you want to go nuts scheduling things, you could probably fit another class in there, but then you're going to upset the apple cart someplace else. And as I finish up, I just want to ask Jody and Perry if there's something else relevant to this that I haven't mentioned and should be brought forward.
I think the only thing is it's not like we can say, ooh, well, we'll move this class to C period for this, because then you'll lose enrollment. It's in this period because that's when the schedule can maximize the number of kids who get the course they requested. And the Pearson scheduling engine looks at, I think we currently have it set to 10 or 15,000 iterations of every combination of schedule for every kid who's requesting every course. So I'm not, you can't do this. There had been times when we have had to, for a variety of different reasons, kind of put a course in where there's a spot. The enrollment doesn't happen. Maybe there's 15 kids who want it and that it only fits for 3 of those kids. And they can't move because of where their English is and their math is and their science is. So,
This document and the work that you all have done is really informative. It's pretty impressive.
Okay.
But I could speak to this now.
Okay.
And I think that's the value of the document and the discussion points. And I couldn't speak to it before, so I can't be alone in that. But this is a little bothersome, especially when we're looking at some of the more contemporary courses that you are suggesting that kids are going to be jazzed about taking, and we just don't have anywhere to put them. And to accommodate some of those traditional, college-facing programs. So this is really valuable, thank you.
Well,
Now, you're not gonna agree with me.
I agree with you. The only thing that bothers me is that this isn't all the science that they have. I mean, they've got science in
Right.
the kitchen, and they've got science in the workshop. And I know that the direction is to have more applied. We talk about having some other type of program for non-traditional learners. I mean, to me, Engineering the Future was perfect only because, 95% of those kids pass in CAS, it's out of the way, and we don't advertise it. In fact, when my son signed up, somebody called me on the phone and tried to talk me out of it. I was like, what? I was like, why? And they said, well, because, it's not college accredited or something. I don't know what it was. And then it became college accredited halfway through it. But apparently a lot of kids dropped out of it, which was a shame because the class was awesome. He got MCAS out of the way, and he was off and running. It was really a great class.
And I think that's different at different high schools. Like I know at Clinton High School, every freshman is required to take Engineering to the Future.
Really?
And
Is it the same type of program?
yes, actually they came to Neshoba to look at our program. It was from the Museum of Science.
Okay.
And then every freshman takes that and they get that MCAS portion out of the way.
Yeah, it was
So it
awesome.
varies from school to school, how the curriculum is rolled out. I think one of the drawbacks with ETF at the high school is it's only offered at the CP level. So you can't take it accelerated or.
It was offered when he went at Accelerated because he was going in at Accelerated.
That's right.
But when they all dropped out, it was all at
right, what happened is that the UMass system announced that they would only be taking natural sciences. Okay, counting natural sciences for admissions. Well, that's what everybody said, including I personally wrote a letter and said, excuse me, to the Mass Board of Higher Ed and DESE, this is a STEM initiative, this is a DESE created course in conjunction with Museum of Science, and the other hand, Board of Higher Ed is gonna say no. And it took them a year, but they had their meetings and said, oh yeah, no, we meant we'll take STEM course, we'll take,
Okay.
so there was a lapse year, and yes, like you talk about with the kids didn't think there was soccer, so nobody
Right.
enrolled.
Is it possible it's the same right now? Because I know a lot of parents are like, wow, we got that out of my freshman year. They were surprised.
No, all of the 8th grade teachers know.
So they know now,
Yeah.
right?
But I think your point is well taken, Mary. If it had 3 levels, it would get
Right.
more of a...
There was a couple of years we offered it at CP and accelerated,
Right,
and then the
right.
accelerated was dropped.
Right, because of that circumstance, yeah.
Because he was going into accelerated, and I said, just get MCAS out of the way. It's just off your plate.
Harry, the 2 courses that you just talked about, the bioethics and the human genome and personalized medicine, are those the 5 or 6 credit courses?
They're actually 2 credit courses, they're each
Semester courses,
Well,
okay.
I'm sorry, let me amend that. Bioethics would be a 4 credit class because it's English, a semester of English coupled with a
Gotcha.
semester of science. But it would just be 1 semester, and then the other one was a 2 credit class, so they're just semester long classes.
But it doesn't complicate the schedule more than using one room.
No. I mean,
Yeah.
Correct.
But it needs a double block.
and the bioethics shouldn't, because that's in place of something else that they would be taking, most
Uh-huh.
likely. Although it could be an additional class. The bioethics could be in addition to something else. So, I mean, if something's replacing something else, then it doesn't likely have room constraints. The other one could be the personalized medicine. Could
Again, we
be
have-
something that people take in addition to something else that could have potential.
Teaching restraints, I guess.
An English class?
It's going to be a combination, so they'll do it, it'll be a...
But can you use it, because you need a full credit English to graduate?
Would be
Correct.
English 12 and bioethics. So the transcript will show them as discrete courses. They'll be taught back to back, and much of the curriculum will be interwoven.
But will they get the credits if they need to graduate
Yes.
in English?
You'd only get 1 semester of English out of that, though,
Correct.
correct?
The kids take 2 semesters
Right.
of English 12.
But that would not completely take care of their...
So it would be half of their
They would need another...
Yeah. Okay.
But they do
Yeah.
that, they do that anyway. The seniors take 1 semester of British-related English, and 1 semester of, it's relatively wide open English. So that would be 1 semester of their English. And they
Okay,
would
I
have-
remember now, mine took Shakespeare, I forgot it.
Yes.
So can I ask kind of a scheduling question? From a naive view, it looks like you can fit 3-ish of classes, more or less, depending. And it turns out, new classes tend to, you try to fit them in the space that's available after you've dealing with your existing foundation. You might say, always, that you're carrying forward from year to year.
From a room scheduling standpoint, no, that's not how it works.
So really, all the classes get thrown into the air and then jammed in place on an annual basis for the scheduling process. Is that kind of except recognizing you have biology in the biology labs and
The answer to that is
Chemistry,
yes, there is, within Power School, Power Scheduler, we do identify priorities. So in other words, schedule this first, schedule this next, and so on.
Right.
So they're not all scheduled exactly concurrently, but it's all happening at, the same time with certain priorities for things to be scheduled. So we don't go back in later and say, oh, we've got, space C period in room 171, let's put a class there. Power Scheduler is saying, here are the rooms available, here are the course requests, here are the people who are going to be teaching courses, let's make it all work.
Right. So consequently, you end up with science classrooms that can't really be used for science, but it's available for general class because you can't work it into the schedule for science, given all the other constraints surrounding it and all the other things that people do.
So that one more time, science classrooms that...
So it turns out, just because of the happenstance of how
Right, there might
how
be...
schedules interlock for each student and for each teacher, you end up having an available classroom space that could be used for general stuff because you can't use it for science.
So 171, room 171 C period doesn't have a class schedule, so we could conceivably schedule a math class in there. I
Right.
think actually at one point we did schedule a math class in
English
there.
and math have both.
Right.
So Science classrooms are more problematic to schedule a different type of class
Because it's a
in.
scarce resource and also it's a funny shaped thing.
Exactly, but, conceivably it is a place that now, a lot of these, like room 107 looks like, oh, there's plenty of space, but there actually isn't because of the labs,
Right.
the every other day labs. There isn't a consistent place for it. But, room 167, you've got one free period consistently. Room 171, you've got one period. Room 169, room 172. So you could conceivably schedule another class in there.
And if I can just draw your attention, if you look at room 151, B period, you'll see how the color changes. That B period biology is actually in room 113 on days 1 and 5. And then on days 2, 3, 4, and 6, 7, 8, it's in room 151.
Wow.
Oh,
Okay.
that's messed up.
You couldn't put them in 171? Instead it was straight across.
Nope.
Just out of curiosity.
No, because that's C
It had
period,
to
it's
be
free.
B.
It's B
Okay.
period.
It's B period.
It had to be big, got it.
So, we're getting pretty inventive
Yeah.
and filling things in now.
So you think, how many science classes do you think we need?
Theoretically, you could put 4.
Well, at least one.
Oh,
At least one more lab.
I think we need more than one, no? Well, but that allows for
One,
3 to 5.
one gets us out of the immediate problem.
Today.
So, yeah, if we had one more today, I don't think we'd be talking about students being turned away from classes unless they were simply undersubscribed. These are oversubscribed. So if we had one more today, I don't think we'd talk about science labs being oversubscribed. For the future, no, one more is not enough, but there's no, as we sit here today, there's no direction, so I couldn't venture to speculate how many more science labs we're gonna need and when.
But I guess
I think that's a going forward area for this committee to look in. So all I can present today is I'm limited in what I know, so that's all I can present today. I don't want to make speculation part of my
Well, yeah,
presentation.
Right.
But enrollment has a piece to do with that. So even if you had one more classroom and it'd make everything work out this year, if next year, if you had a population bump of 25, then you need one more room, it would take up that one room and you're back to where you were this year.
That could, well, yeah, I didn't ask about next year's enrollment. so-
But I think it kind of,
No, it, all this does is gives us a snapshot of the science lab situation this year. It doesn't, and it gives us a solid foundation upon which to ask questions about the future.
So you really can't add more than a class that has more than one period.
Well, even if you add that class, who knows if the teacher isn't tied up someplace else?
Or if the kid's schedule can accommodate it.
And here's what will happen. If you take the other 25 kids and stuff them in here so you have another period, maybe it forces in room 107, because it's going to force the classes to be scheduled, okay? At the expense of kids getting their requests. So maybe that 5-credit physics that needs C and D in that room 107 now has to flip, and those labs have to be days 2 and 6. And, oh well, jazz band kids, you're not gonna get your physics.
Well, yeah, we see that, right?
Welcome to my world. I mean,
Yeah.
this is where the trade-offs are made. If we tell the schedule, you have to fit it, and it can do it, it doesn't want to, but it trades off kids' course requests
Yeah.
and the conflicts with other classes to schedule the class.
so what this doesn't really show, but it's been discussed, is, it shows how jammed the science classrooms are scheduled, but not all the other variables of all the other students and all the other classes that they're trying to take.
And
And it's a big domino effect of once you kind of
Correct.
touch one thing, it's like,
Yes.
Right, exactly. Right.
and it's kind of a rooms-driven thing, rooms and teachers, I guess. If you had more rooms and more teachers, then
It's both. Currently teachers impact it more than rooms do. Science labs, I think, are the place where we see the most stark results of how rooms play out, because most of the other classes, foreign language, math, social studies, English, can all be taught in generic rooms, and we have a lot more generic rooms, so there's more room to play. So right now, I would say that it's more about teacher availability than it is about rooms, but it's now starting to shift where simple general room availability is beginning to come available.
But isn't it true if someone was like interested in band,
Ugh.
but also kind of wanted some of these, kind of,
Yes.
advanced placement, like it does have
Yes.
because there's less offerings.
Correct. Room availability is becoming an increasing constraint on the
We're
schedule
at
that
that
has a
point.
domino effect,
Purposeful.
as you said.
4 years ago you were, because I have a kid who's going to school for musical theater in New York, and she had to drop all of her music classes unless they met after school to accommodate the academic needs. And that's a shame.
But isn't that where we're seeing a trend of demand, where it's?
In the
it's-
arts?
Yeah.
But they're not letting go of academics to
They
add
can't,
arts.
I mean, you look at the 3 towns we live in, I'm a parent, I'm not gonna let my kids let go of their academics, but frankly, I don't think this school system breeds kids who wanna let go of their academics.
Right. Right.
So, and I mean that sincerely.
Yes. I agree with you.
So it's like we're forcing the kids to make the choice, where it's shameful because I don't think that.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. Engineering the future. Is there space in the woodshop to have more engineering the future classes? Could you have an accelerated or an honors class?
Is there space to do it? Probably.
I think what Andy does right now is he has the wood shop classes in the wood shop, and then a couple days a week he leaves and he goes to a computer lab to do computer pieces of the
We did
class.
a little computer design. In fact, that's one of the classes. It's a
So,
separate
and
class.
computer labs are pretty,
Very tight,
utilized.
because now we're expanding computer science. So computer science is the more computer science classes you have, the more we don't have a computer science lab. It's going into the CAD lab and the engineering lab. So it's it's
Same down.
very tight.
right.
And right now, Perry, you're using every staff member you have in the science department, for example, everybody is scheduled.
Oh, yeah.
So to add, I think, Mark, you were trying to allude to this, so period G in 172 and C in 171 and F in 167, that means a .6 teacher that would have to be added to be able to teach those courses.
So is the shop room, the classes that are in the shop room that are shop classes, have you seen increase, decrease, or a stable number of kids for the amount of classes that are in that shop room for shop? Have you seen a decline?
So, when I think long-term, there used to be more. I think the enrollment has declined somewhat. I think when the shop teachers were teaching ETF, we were trading off and not running a woods course because we were running an ETF course,
ATF is,
engineering the future. And I think that we haven't fully rebounded from that, like your soccer piece.
Joey, would it be fair to say too that when we had an 8-period day and there were more class selections, that more of those courses were offered, but when we cut a period, that also limited choices?
Why do you cut a break?
We're going back now 16, 17 years. I think that the teaching period was 41 minutes or 42 minutes. It was too short. It was, and there was, the reason for dropping a period was instructional time. And at the time, we had kids in 2 and 3, at least 2 studies, some of them in 3 studies. There wasn't faculty to fully staff that 8-period day. I think it was the second year I got here that it went to a 7-period day.
Is there any study showing that the longer class time was helpful?
Well, it's
The-
more
the shorter-
instructional time, because you take, it's still 7:40 to 2:20, so you've got the
Right.
total number of instructional hours over the course of the year. If you divide that up into 8 periods as opposed to 7 periods, each class has that has a lower number of hours of instructional time over the course of the year. So you're taking the same curriculum and saying, teach it in fewer hours.
But-
So, yes, there's plenty of research that says if you take a static curriculum and try to, and allot fewer hours to it, that students aren't gonna learn as much because they have less time on learning.
And I think that even the kids would say that having time, you know, you get presented the math concept, and you have time to practice, start practicing it, the teacher is there in class. I don't think that there's ever been a question about the length of the periods. I think we all want the flexibility that an 8-period day might bring, but it needs to have commensurate staffing with it too. If you just today went to an 8-period day, you'd have 1,100 kids with another study in their schedule unless you guys wanted to ante up a bunch of teachers.
Well, there's not rooms for teachers.
Huh?
Because there's not necessarily rooms to.
Well, and then we would have
I guess there is room. There is room in the wood shop to be able to accommodate more ETF classes. It's currently used 4 periods out of 7.
Wow, so you could have 3 more, so you could have an accelerated and an honors.
So there are 3
Cool.
periods that are currently not scheduled in the woods.
But from
But
what you
then you're up in
said,
the woods classes.
but he's saying it's not being used.
So there's no course
Teachers-
teacher either.
The teacher's being
Teachers
used.
being used.
Yeah.
Right. The person who would teach that class is teaching other classes, so if they teach ETF classes and they're not teaching the other classes.
Gotcha. But that's a class that, I mean, what are you gonna use the 2 classrooms for, the proposed classrooms?
You talking about the
modular.
The modulars?
Yeah.
The most likely, I mean, it would be generic class, so it would be math, foreign language, English, or social studies.
Okay.
And I would suggest that that although we don't necessarily see it, the room constraints are an issue. When Perry tells you that there's only 1 classroom-free B period in the whole school, you know there has to, like, you add 1 more class and then that's it. You know, you simply, the computer's not gonna say, oh, hey, Jody, if I'd had another room, I could have done this better. It's just gonna put something else in a different period.
Right.
And we won't know
What the effect is, okay.
what the effect is. Because what'll happen is 1 kid will lose jazz, and 1 kid will lose honors English, and 1 kid will lose German. And you can't put your hands on that. You guys can all come schedule with me if you want. All I know, if I never ask for lunch, the trickle effect would be right here. is all.
Make sure you let us know when you ask for a raise, Michael makes it. And Perry too.
From start of a scheduling run to the end of it, we do one real cycle. How long of your attention does it take to do that?
But like this conversation,
Right.
there's not a discrete.
Even if it's a plan and conversation with people and then a post effect, okay, this is that problem, you know, what is that, what is the cycle for you to go through? In terms of your effort and time?
There's the process of developing the program of studies, are there new courses that are being proposed?
So it's even pre stuff you
Decisions
have
that
to
happen
do.
with that, you finalize the program of studies, you
Right.
get that information out to people, you have an open
Right.
house, you just explain that to 8th grade parents, teachers go in and put their course registration, their course
Right.
recommendations in, kids go in and they register with their courses, you go and meet with 8th graders at the middle schools to talk to them about things. you
Campaigning
register.
all the time for your
You
schedule.
see all the
basically.
kids and help them to balance all, you know, so I get
All right, so
today.
narrowing my question down just to the technical side.
Just to the technical
As
side.
opposed to the campaigning
So
side.
the technical side begins when Janine Icorse, the registrar, gives me a spreadsheet that says, here are the course enrollment requests. And then I meet with the department heads, I say, here's how many kids have requested this, this, and this. You have X number of teaching sections available because of the number of teachers you have. How do you want to schedule this? And so we.
Right, so the judgment there about, do we want to hold this course or not, or do we want to combine courses or not?
Correct.
Before you even come to scheduling
Absolutely.
question.
So before we really do the building the schedule part, we by hand decided how many sections are we going to run of this, who's going to be teaching these courses, and that involves trade-offs. And there'll be some changes along the way as inevitably things play out. But once that is set, all that information then gets entered into PowerSchool. So there's a pretty significant data entry piece where you're saying, okay, this teacher is going to teach 3 sections of this, and these are the rooms that can schedule. And some of that information rolls over, but a lot of it doesn't. It has to be re-entered by hand. Inevitably, there are errors in that process. We forgot to check this box, and we checked this box when we weren't supposed to. So you enter all of that data in, And then you start doing runs. Stop me when I start.
You missed the whole debug phase, Dr. Graham.
So there's a debug phase.
Validation errors.
So
I
after the
have to do it.
conversations, how long does it take to set up your program, assuming you do it fairly well? Is that a couple
Yeah,
of
it's
weeks?
a lot,
Weeks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Weeks.
And then you start running, so then
Right.
after you debug, and then.
Right, there you're committed to your curriculum at that point, and say, okay, we really want all of these things, we've had the discussions necessary. Can we make them happen, is when you.
So you've entered all that information into Power School, you've fixed things, you say, okay, now make it all work, and Power School comes back and says there are all kinds of errors, and there's lots of time going back in and figuring out what was the error, how did we screw up. Because we try to do some funky things. When you say things like, I want this English teacher or science teacher to teach a 2-period class, and so I need them to be back-to-back but scheduled in the same room. Those are tricky things to get Power School to do the right way. So then Power School finally will produce something, and you go in and you look and you see, okay, what percentage of kids got their request for this, got the request for that. You print a report that says, here are all the kids that didn't make it into this class, all the kids that didn't make it into this class. Then you might say, okay, we need to go in and do some stuff within the architecture and run it again. So usually you run, last year we ran
Dozens.
many different versions of going in, and you say, okay, hold on, we're not getting enough kids into this, let's change it and bump it up in the priority, so we schedule this a little bit sooner. So you keep going through these iterations of doing this, and that takes lots and lots of hours.
So it can take several weeks to get to your first iteration, and then finally, you've got something.
So now you
begin
finally you have a
to play
schedule,
with, right?
and she says, Perry, are you happy with this? Because once you say yes, I'm going to treat this as the schedule, and we're going to start doing lots of other things with it.
Right.
So finally, and usually I say, oh yeah, it looks great, and then I'll come back the next day and say, oh, by the way, I was thinking maybe we could, and then she beats me over the
He's
head with
promised me many raises.
And so finally we get to and we say, this is the schedule, and then we load the kids into the schedule. So now you can actually go in and see, take this kid, here's what their schedule looks like. And then the guidance department jumps in. Did I forget something?
Right, one piece of that is we will go through, when he thinks he's got something that works, so we'll sanity check it, we'll do a shakedown of it, and then we come back and we do have something that we think works, and now what we have to do is unconflict, because this child didn't get band, this
Right.
child didn't get honors English, this child didn't get German, and it takes all the guidance counselors trying to unconflict all these schedules to figure out that the problem is that band, English, and 3 of the foreign languages are all competing for 2 periods. So all of these kids that, because it's easy, earlier in the show, if we ran a schedule and we had 15 kids didn't get honors biology, we know that's a problem. That's an identified problem, it shows me. But when each kid doesn't get one course, doesn't necessarily look like there's a problem until we go to shake it down and we find the various
Follow the threads back.
places where this is unresolvable. And we come back to him and say, okay, here's the deal. Because of this, jazz band is gonna lose 7 more kids. And he has to make decisions about what becomes the best schedule, keeping in mind that every change we make, we lose. Like, it's not like the old piece of the schedule we can go back to. And just to toot my own, we'll do all these changes, we'll unconflict the schedule, and then he'll say, oh yeah, no, we need to do this, and we'll run the whole thing over again. So there's.
He's laughing right now.
Sometimes I don't really want to change anything, I just want to.
It's a lovely kind of thing. I have to say, and I don't think anybody recognizes, Neshoba is built around maximizing student requests. That is at the heart of how that school runs, what the kids want to sign up for, the care that the teachers take with recommendations, the parents with their kids, the guidance counselors, and tremendous amount of time in building a schedule so that the kids get their requests. This is an incredibly robust curriculum. We should be for the resources that many schools are much more vanilla. And I know schools that just roll their schedule over every year. There's very little change. They just roll it over. We build from scratch every year because the kids' needs change. And I think that's a huge attribute to this school and this district, that's how it goes. But it is a very long.
It's worth it. But it's-
Can I ask a question? Over the past whatever number of years, as enrollment has, whatever, increased slightly year to year, and how much more complex has that process been, you know? Is it much more complicated than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Is it kind of, it's a constant trend towards more difficult juggling of all those things?
Well, it is, because one of the things you gotta do now is really look at the room usage. And you'll have things like, you know, a computer course is stuck in the wrong period. Nobody can get it because it's the period the lab was free. So there's much more, yes, it is, it's added layers. As the building gets, it adds layers when we're short on staff, and it adds layers when we're short on rooms as a resource, for sure.
Also, the more, the funkier you try to get with what you're doing, you know, when you try to offer cool new courses, that's great, but those create additional constraints within the master schedule as well. It makes it more complicated. But again, I think it's ultimately worth it because you're able to give kids more of the kinds of things they want. And then, so the end of the process then is, well, it's kind of a long end, that after you've got it built and you've got in, you've resolved all these things, you've got kids who only got scheduled into one semester of an elective, and they need to be 25 credits. So we need to go in and start identifying which kids didn't get enough credits and didn't get the electives classes they wanted, and start trying to figure out how to book them into classes. And that, we'll get as much of that done as we can before the end of the year, but then we get the schedules into kids' hands before they leave at the end of the year. And then guidance continues to work over the summer and the week before school starts to keep working with kids to play with their schedules. I will say, the better the job we do before summer and before school starts, the less work there is then once school starts and trying to, you know, have massive moves from kids across places. Oh, we've got to create a new section of this. We've had pretty calm Septembers, which lets teachers focus on classes and kids and teaching, and lets guidance focus on working with kids as opposed to working with the schedule. So it's better, in my opinion, at least, to put the time in on the front end, because otherwise you put time in the back.
The difference between having a schedule out in early or even mid-June, but giving guidance a couple of weeks with the kids, or having it come out in the summer, is 2 or 3 days of schedule fixing at the start of school, or 2 or 3 weeks of schedule fixing.
I heard your question differently. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they used to just schedule it and then throw in the classes, but once they hit 1,000 kids for the school, students, it became schedule the classes and then place the kids. It became a lot more difficult when we hit 1,000 students. And now we're at, what, 1138?
I don't know if there was a specific threshold.
There was, yeah.
Because we were talking about at what point did that become?
Rooms kicked in again. I think we decided it was Jeremy's last year here. I'd have to go back and look up what the numbers were. But keep in mind, everything changes.
About 1,000 actually, I would guess. Because when I got here, there was more than 1,000.
I don't.
So it's probably high 900s, more than 1,000.
High 900s. We could have a big run on 5 credit sciences this year.
Yeah.
Okay? But forget increased population.
Why is 5 credits so popular?
Kids like science, kids like doing the labs help their grades.
But wouldn't 6 and 8 be better?
Helps. 6 is physics, 8 is an AP.
And we don't do 6.
So we're talking biology and chemistry, the entire sophomore and virtually most of the junior class doing, if we just look at those two and we don't even put anatomy and physiology in, we just say those two, that would present a significant problem.
Okay, anything else? You know, we beat this horse good and dead, but is there anything else that we haven't mentioned that should be brought forth about the science labs?
Well, it doesn't, we haven't helped them.
No, we haven't helped them. No. The goal here is for us to understand what they've known for years.
Oh, where it was heading in.
This is actually, this is when you say we've done for years, this visual is cool.
Yeah.
I'd never looked at it that way before.
Well, I wish ETNF were on that, and
I only asked about the science labs because
You know you're gonna get sucked in.
that's what the
He's gonna kill me for that one.
That's what the big constraints, that's what the conversation's been about, is
Yeah, but it's
for
science.
several years, is the science labs.
Yeah, but it's still science.
Well, it is,
Yep.
it is.
But I don't think that there was this perspective. I don't want to, Michael, you probably could speak to this better than I can, because I just remember coming up on town meeting floor for the science labs, and it was like, it just kind of popped up, and I wasn't there because I didn't know what the need was. I don't know if anybody knew that it was, and maybe we weren't even in this situation back then.
So we, like you said,
Wouldn't be far off.
yeah, we've been in it since
Wouldn't be far off.
maybe 2011, 12.
Well, it certainly wasn't conveyed.
Certainly
To-
not,
to
but if people could digest
But
it.
the other significant piece of this, which and it's kind of getting off into the larger area of all space needs, is this problem is independent of how big those science labs are.
Right.
So
Yeah.
even if we had science labs that were 25% bigger, we would still be in exactly the same situation.
Got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a big deal, and going back to 2011 or 2010, all we were really offered was larger science labs.
Well, we added two, but, yeah.
Were we gonna add?
Yeah, we're at.
We're also removing general classrooms in order to do so.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Maybe Robin Peter to save law.
Okay. So, all right,
Great work, Bob.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jody and Perry. Perry, did you have some aspects of your presentation? You said you hadn't finished. The agenda kind of already went out, under.
If there's time,
next
I
course.
would be happy to speak to more of that, but I don't have to save that for another time. If people feel like I beat that horse last time, not that we want to beat horses, but I'm happy to speak more to that if people want. That was a possibility.
Did anybody have any further questions for Perry on
I
his
wasn't
piece?
here, so I can't.
It wasn't the March 5th meeting, it was the one back in December. Yeah.
Remember the thing that I handed out as like a 5 or 6 page document and
Yeah.
it's talked
Yes.
about that?
Yeah.
If there were still, I
Lingering questions.
there were.
we went through the last page and a half
I
pretty
was
quick.
talking about that.
Right.
Right.
What was great about you walking us through it is just to hear many more words or perspectives on what you put forth. That was just very helpful, I think, to hear that. So in the sense that, in that sense, questions were not really needed. It was just very helpful for you to walk us through it. And I have no objection to, walking through the last page and a half or so, non-rush through basis.
Yeah.
I could do that. I didn't know if you had the interim report.
It depends what the group wants to do, if they want to. Once you, I don't know, I put together another interim report. I don't know if you want to go through that or if you want to have Perry finish up. The interim report is certainly not something we would vote on tonight, but I think it'd be helpful to discuss it and.
So maybe we should wrap up with Barry's stuff if someone has more questions and then
Okay.
jump into,
Yeah,
Does anybody need a copy? I think I've got a couple of extras here.
what's the title of it?
It's called High School Building Task Force Draft Need Summary. But a 3-page.
What is this from?
This was from December. Mary, did you?
Trying to put together kind of, there were a couple questions that we put out about how does space, there were 3 questions at the beginning. And I kind of tried to go through. So, I don't remember exactly where we stopped last time. Did we get through the core curriculum?
We watched the video and did the minutes, so we're at for theater classes. Yeah, the theater classes, the extension of the theater program.
No. You
So,
said-
I think we,
We did
direction?
that, but
What direction?
Programs, I think I talked about that too, didn't I?
in terms of science classes.
Yeah, it's based.
we didn't.
Well,
I don't think so.
so I apologize, these weren't numbered, but, so I think I finished when I finished, we were at the bottom of the third page, where the last two bullets on that page are specialized wellness courses and journalism courses and program. And I think I'd spoken to the specialized wellness courses, classes like RAD and CrossFit. RAD is the rate regression defense class, which we have in the auditorium, and one of the impacts of that then is we're trying to expand the theater arts programming. So like the Tech Week for Peter Pan, our theater arts classes essentially just moved out of the auditorium for that week, and they figured out some other place to go because they need the auditorium to be setting up for Peter Pan. That Monday, we had Flying by Foy come in and set up all the cool harnesses that they used, and so like our RAD classes were just out there.
It was magic.
It was pixie dust, right?
Yeah, sure.
So specialized wellness courses end up needing specialized spaces, and that becomes problematic because one person wants this space, but then that kicks somebody else out. Journalism courses and programming, so we've started to see real growth in our journalism program and a real push towards trying to do some pretty cool stuff. So we have two teachers who, one teacher, Jackie Carter, well actually two English teachers. Jackie Carter, who's the English department head, also teaches multiple journalism courses. Steve Kendall also teaches a journalism course in the English department. And then Linda Oft, who's one of our technology teachers, does video production. So they've all kind of worked together. One of the things they do, there's more kind of standard journalism, what it is, but they are also responsible for our video news, which we've now started doing weekly. We actually do that, we stream that live over the web now and archive that on the website so people can go back and see it. We would like to really continue to expand that. We see opportunities to be taking performances, athletic events, and being able to live stream those or archive those for people to be able to see. We see some opportunities. In fact, I met with Teresa Sauer from BATCO just the other day. We're continuing to talk about ways that we can create collaboration between BATCO and our journalism courses. But one of the problems is space. Where we currently do all of our broadcasting is in what still is and had historically been kind of office space. So it's a very small classroom or a decent-sized office for about 3 people, but we've set up our broadcast studio in there as well. Looking at classroom space next year, that's a space that I might have to look to cannibalize to create classroom space, and so then the question comes, where do the journalism broadcasts go, where the people who have their offices in there go. So space is definitely a challenge currently, and will be continuing to be a challenge for our journalism courses and programming.
Harry, just to interrupt with that, many schools that I visit, they have a TV studio.
Right.
They have a large space. So a lot of the things that, we say that we have, we've actually gotten very creative with space. So when the kids wanted to do videotaping, we put it in the back of my office. When the school store space went away, they gave us a closet. We made that a school store. So there's a lot of things that if you go into other schools, they have the space, and I think we've tried to do a very good job without the space to have some of those things. But
alternative education programs, we have in the budget to start an alt ed program next year with a part-time teacher, with the hope of starting to serve some kids as soon as possible and then expanding that in the future. I see a real area of need there. But one of the questions is space, and at some point in the future, there are philosophical arguments for and against it, but at one point in the future, it might be a conversation to look at having an alternative ed program that's off-site. Especially initially for the next couple of years, I would really want to have any alt-ed programming be on-site for a variety of reasons, but figuring out where that's going to be is challenging.
What are you calling alternate education program?
So, the opportunity for students to take classes that are different from what we currently offer, and where you have one of the things that some of our kids struggle with is a traditional classroom environment where you're going from period to period to period for 7 periods of the day, and you're going to a traditional English kind of class, and you're going to a traditional social studies kind of class. We have kids who really, really struggle with that and are at risk of dropping out. Some of them do drop out, some of them end up choosing to go to alternative settings outside of the district. So trying to create a more holistic curricular programming where it's not, the classes themselves aren't as traditional. These students also generally benefit tremendously from having adults who are working in very close contact with them, who know them well and who are overseeing them. And if you have a kid going from this English teacher to this social studies teacher, to this science teacher, to this math teacher, but there's not one person, and guidance counselors to a certain extent can serve that function, but when guidance counselors are carrying 240, 245 kids on a caseload, it's challenging to do that. We have social workers, and so social workers who work with kids who have mental health challenges oftentimes. But having a program that allows flexible curriculum and has somebody who's working directly with kids and offering some real alternatives to the traditional structure is what we're looking at. That sounds somewhat vague because I don't know exactly what that would look like initially. We've gone out, we've looked at alternative programs in other high schools, and they look different at different schools. You could go to a school like Fitchburg and see Fitchburg Night School. Fitchburg Night's going to look very different from, I think, Acton has a program that is during the day that works with a specific population of kids. So we started to do.
What size population are we looking at?
It's a good question. I would say initially we're probably not talking about more than 10 to 20, 25 kids. But in
So
part because I don't know that we could serve many more kids than that initially.
So if these kids are that non-traditional, would it make sense to have them do an afternoon to night program?
It could. There are transportation challenges that if
Or
you
just
do
bus them?
if you do it, say again?
We would be required to bus them at that point, still?
We wouldn't be required to bus them, I don't think, but if you do something like that, then number one, you're probably talking about kids who can drive, so that limits it. So that's certainly not an impossibility. That could be, you could look at some sort of a program like that. You have some overlap with the end of the school day and it's extending into the afternoon. When we went and, I went and did focus groups with kids, and they were a little bit all over the place in terms of when they would want things. I asked kids, an alternative program would make sense in terms of time. And some kids said, I'd like to get here earlier so I can get done earlier so then I can go to a job. Other kids said, I'd like to come at night because then I can do stuff during the day. Other kids said, I want it to be about the same time that we currently have. So I think we still have to figure out, we still have questions to answer about who exactly are we serving and what's going to be the best structure to fit those kids' needs, which is why I think starting small and building rather than saying we're going to do this and then suddenly nobody shows up, or it's not structured the way that would make the most sense.
One last one you might want to look at, there's charter schools within schools.
Mhm.
So you control over it, but it's its own, because you're actually you're talking about a population that's really not going to mingle with the rest of the population.
I don't know. It certainly could. It could be that you have 3 periods a day where you're going into an alternative programming, and you have 2 or 3 periods a day where you're going to more traditional electives types classes, but most of your core classes are done through some sort of a interdisciplinary, more holistic program. So there are a variety of different ways you can do it.
Well, when you figure out where you want to go, because they've already started doing them, it's charter school within high school.
Yep.
So you could have a program within a program. Yeah.
Space. Right, and I mean, it is
But
very.
again, it's funded different.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting to look at. Doing anything like this is very complex. Like Perry said, there's a lot of different models. We really need to look at everything, explore everything, and then look at our resources that we have and what will fit us best. Space will definitely be an issue.
And
I
that's the
think
thing,
why it
the
gets
more
brought
creative
up.
you start to get, the more space starts to constrain to creativity.
Yeah.
If you were to speculate for a population of 25 or 30, how many spaces of classroom size or smaller are desirable? Do you have
I think it all
a
depends on
wild
the things
guess?
that you're trying to accomplish. One of the alternative schools that, so we've had a committee that's been looking at this all year long, and one of the alternatives, we visited different alternative schools. One of the alternative schools is called, I think it's the Walden School, I believe it's in New Hampshire, and it is very non-traditional. I mean, they use the outdoors as a classroom. I mean, you know, in winter, they're going out and they're making breakfast over a fire and reading poetry and.
Don't need a classroom for that.
So you don't need a classroom for that. And a lot of the kids, when we describe that to kids that do with focus groups, a lot of the kids, that really resonated for them. They said, I love the idea of getting out, being outside as much as possible. You know, that creates new kinds of constraints.
They might change their mind when it rains.
They may change their mind what?
When it rains.
When it rains. So, I mean, it depends. It depends on what kinds of spaces you're talking about, too. Do you need small breakout rooms? Can you just have one big classroom and have it function there? Do you need access to computers? You know, there are options to do web-based learning. So, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. I think if you've got 25 or 30 kids, you're probably talking about 3 different spaces, and they might be configured differently. Even if you're talking about 10 to 20 kids, I think you're ideally talking about 2 spaces.
So this is more small, specialized classrooms. So this is not the same kind of ratio.
Oh, yeah, no, this would be a smaller ratios.
So, I guess my question would be, which would be the challenge is, how do you determine who's going to be in this class?
We don't know that.
Part of, I mean,
That's one of the questions that we're trying to answer. So we've done a lot of work on trying to identify students who we think would be candidates, looking at kids who have significant numbers of, or patterns of Ds and Fs, kids who have significant numbers of unexcused absences or tardies. Those have been kind of the main criteria, the kids that we see not on path towards graduation because they're apathetic, they don't click, they don't come to school as much as we would like them to, and then they fall behind. They have the intellectual capacity to do well in the class, but they don't do the work. Kids who might have different challenges outside of school, challenges in the family. Sometimes you've got kids who've experienced substance abuse. So if there are some common threads, it would be kids who have shown a pattern of academic underperformance and who are on track towards not graduating on time.
So this is not a problem just for us, this is a problem for many districts.
It's a problem for every high school in the country.
So why isn't there a collaborative like we have in special ed?
I didn't hear you.
Why isn't there a collaborative like there is for special ed? I think there's been conversation about, it's hard
Just
to,
for 25 kids?
in my experience is it's challenging and costly to be able to put together something like that. It's challenging from a space perspective, it's challenging from a staffing perspective, it's really expensive. You can get a lot of different kinds of kids. I mean, one of the things we want to try to do is avoid talking about kids who have disciplinary problems, because that can quickly become oh, it's great if we can take this kid who's eating up our time with discipline stuff and have them go somewhere else. That's a very different kid from a kid who doesn't have disciplinary issues, but who is apathetic, isn't coming to school, is failing classes, but isn't a discipline problem. And so I think sometimes it can become, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you know a lot more about this than I do, Michael, but it'd be hard to craft something that really works for different populations.
and society will.
And I think that when you keep them home, in their home district, it's more successful. If I was to suppose why there haven't been collaboratives created, kids that have a hard time engaging in the traditional school day also don't want to then leave their school. And if you have a program that has some level of fluidity with it, they don't become those kids in that school. Maybe for this year they're doing things alternatively, but they're back on track and back.
But what you're talking about isn't going to come to fruition for how long?
So we have in the budget to have a .6 alternative education program teacher for next year to start working with kids and to begin answering in more detail some of the questions that you're asking. We've been doing a lot of work to be moving towards an answer. One of the things we found is that you can't fully articulate what you want until you've kind of started to do it some, and because you
Right.
learn from the process.
So are you giving them the choice to work with this person, or is this person just gonna work with them?
I would envision it being a choice, not mandatory. In other words, I'm not picturing a program where we say you have to go to this alternative, because
Right.
that feels
Mhm.
punitive and also starts to feel, discipline-based. I'm picturing this as, you don't seem to be doing well in this environment, here's an alternative approach. Let's see if that might work, if that's something that you want to do. We have another option for you.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
kind of
so
the big
it's-
picture.
So there will be kids next year in a alternative environment.
Potentially. If it passes the budget.
Right, and yeah, I think that's it, for a portion of their day.
For a portion of the day, okay.
For a portion of their day,
That's-
starting to
Right.
have kids actively participating in something that is non-traditional and learning from that experience about who is this going to work for best, what works best.
What do we need next?
Right.
So in a scheduling sense, does that mean we may have a couple of paired rooms or a section slot so that this rides through the schedule together, so you get a longer session and something like that?
When I ask these questions, Perry says we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
There's 3 periods of getting
Okay, we can skip around the science class. It literally, we have to do what we need to do for kids, and I have bought into his philosophy of we will make it work when we get to the point where that's the next thing that we have to make work.
Thank you.
She's never said that. You have it on television, too. James enjoyed that too.
It might be different when you send her back with a.
But it is, I mean, it's a combination of, you have to answer some practical questions at different points, but sometimes you can't answer the practical question until you've figured other stuff out. And so there are lots of questions attached to it, so it's trying to keep moving towards, and next year, assuming that we're able to go forward with this, next year is going to be messy because it'll be our first foray into it, and we'll probably learn a lot more from mistakes than we will from successes, but I'm hoping we'll have a lot of successes and we'll start to figure out what works and what doesn't work. A lot of it comes down to the right person and people too. You get the right person, it'll work. They'll figure out how to make it work.
Do you have somebody in mind?
Nope, I don't have a specific person in mind. Ideally, it would be someone already on staff, so rather than going out and finding somebody, it would be somebody who's in the building who could do a picture I have in my head is you've got someone who's doing this part-time and then teaching classes part-time, and maybe the classes they're teaching, we try to weigh towards those kids as well, so you get a little bit of the best of both worlds. But finding the right person is a huge thing, so no, I mean, are there people on staff that I can think of and say, wow, it'd be great if, I had something like that? Of course, we've got lots of people who I think could.
But they have to agree to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, they have to agree to do it.
Oh.
That's gonna be, it could be exciting, but it could also be really
Yes.
challenging.
Yes, it will be. There's no question it'll be both exciting. I hope it'll be exciting, but there's no question it'll be challenging. So early education programs was another thing that I put on here, and that's not something that we have actively explored, but it's something that I would be very interested in being able to build. And once again, giving kids the opportunity to really do something authentic and meaningful, that would be very powerful, but that's a non-starter right now because of space. But the option to do that would be very exciting. I think we have a lot of kids who really, really benefit from something like that.
In the sense of being exposed to some kind of caretaking role as well as different age groups, is that some of what
Yeah, it's
feel that benefits
kids
these kids?
who are interested in child development, kids who are interested in education have a real-world opportunity to be involved in doing that. There are kids who babysit and you're responsible for taking care of kids, but actually doing early education and thinking through, okay, how do I teach a 4-year-old how to do this? How do I engage a group of 3-year-olds in this type of play? I mean, that's a powerful opportunity for a teenager to actually begin to do some kind of on-the-job training and find out, is this something I'm truly interested in before they go and explore this as a possible career choice.
Could that one be offsite?
No.
No?
Because they rotate in and out for class. I mean, I worked in a school that had this, and it was part of the school, and, it's a daycare. So the kids are in for class. It's not a sort of internship thing, and we have a rotating schedule, so the kids wouldn't even be there.
It'd be very challenging to do on-site. There are lots of barriers to doing this. I wouldn't say it's impossible.
To have those young kids on the high school bond, I would think that would be challenging, because now you've got to keep them segregated.
They are, the high school kids are so wonderful with the little kids in the building, so wonderful, I can't tell you.
I mean, you don't
And
have
it
them in a
appeals to
math
a broad
classroom,
section
you have to have a
of us.
separate place set up, I mean, you have to
Yeah,
have
Like
daycare
structures
facilities.
and all that.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a viable daycare facility set up.
Truly appeals to a broad section of kids. It's,
I think Oregon schools have had that.
Hudson had that, right? Didn't we see that?
Hudson has it, yeah.
I think Clinton has it.
Which is it has it? Which is it, regional?
What you said.
Which is it, regional?
They have a pool too, so. We ain't getting no pool.
I did not put a pool on it.
I know,
It's too
I'll
far.
have to save my pennies for that.
So then the last thing I put in here was administrative and student support tasks. Guidance, for those of you who've been in our guidance office, you know that it's a relatively tight space. It's not a very private space, so, if you have a kid who's upset, who shows up, that they're being upset at a relatively public kind of space, so that's challenging. Just office space, my office has essentially become a revolving space. I was kicked out of my office for a good chunk of today because we had a counselor who was in. We have an off-site counselor that we have a relationship with who actually comes in and does. So it's like if kids would be referred to outside counseling, that the transportation barriers can be challenging for some parents. We've actually contracted with an outside counselor where the kid is receiving outside counseling services, but we allow that to happen on site. That was happening in my office for a while today. And IEP meetings happen in my office. We have the one conference room in the building, which isn't a particularly big conference room, and so if you've got more than 5 or 6 people who want to meet, it's challenging to find space to do that. So office space is we're definitely lacking in office space. And then meeting space, I mentioned the meeting space as well. If you want to have, it's essentially impossible to have 2 meetings going on in our building unless you start to talk about things like the media center, which is a very different kind of space. If you want 2 private, 10+ person meetings happening at the same time, that becomes very challenging to do. Teacher collaboration space. Right now, teachers we have spaces set up by department, mostly by department. Tech ed is tech and business are split across different places. But we do have space for teachers to go and have desks, but we don't have kind of ad hoc small collaborative space, and some of our departments, our fine and performing arts does not have a common space. Our new theater arts teacher her office is literally, what was it, former closet, where we stored music and stuff.
She's got a door.
She does have a door. She does. And she hasn't complained much. She's been fantastic. She was very appreciative to have her own private space.
thank you.
So we don't have a whole lot of space for collaboration. And then at the end, I included some recommended next steps. A lot of this was based on my own thoughts, which were informed by feedback from other people, but I think it might be helpful, or you all tell me if it would be helpful, for me to go, I know I put together previously a list of kind of department heads, like a laundry list of concerns, but to expand on some of these things and get more detailed information from department heads, I would be happy to do that over a period of time if you all think that would be helpful. Or if you think this suffices, that's fine as well. But I would certainly be willing to follow up and expand on this with the support of department heads.
Is it fair to say that classrooms can't be used as an ad hoc meeting space because you get kicked out as soon as the period changes? So you can't really have more than a aligned meeting.
And there will be if a teacher's meeting with a parent, they will try to find classroom space to do that. It may not be the classroom where they normally teach,
Right.
and they'll have to do it between specified times because the bell's going to ring and somebody's going to come in.
Right.
And if you want to have a meeting during B period, you've got one classroom you can choose from. Otherwise, they're all being
So that is a known strategy that's undertaken.
Teachers absolutely will do
Yeah.
that. Teachers will generally meet with parents in classrooms that are available. But that is becoming increasingly challenging.
Or when they offer extra help to kids during their prep.
That's another thing, if a kid wants to come and get extra help from a teacher who happens to be available, finding space to do that becomes challenging as well.
Questions?
I guess one of the things that, and maybe some of the things that they're easier to do and look at science lab and say, well, what do we really need for that? And this covers a lot of different areas, stuff that you talked about last week and what you finished up with this week. And but obviously it's trying to determine what are the needs, what's lacking, particularly with space or kind of either number of rooms or the types of rooms. Is it possible to try to quantify some of those things? But it's probably difficult because I'm sure some of those things are, kind of different priorities of, maybe collaborative space would have a different priority versus something else, and kind of, I don't know, just thinking, how do you, at some point, this needs to get boiled down to kind of showing what the needs are.
We need X
and
number
kind
of general purpose classrooms, we need X number of office space.
Yeah.
We need X number of collaborative rooms for teachers. Yep.
That might be working with your department chair.
Yeah, I would say that's something that I could.
Are you talking totals or additional?
Like
more
what
additional,
can-
more like if you.
I would say total, because a lot of what you have currently is ad hoc. It's stuff that's been converted from one thing to another. And
I would say you kind of need to look at what you need in total and then back out of that to look at what you have currently that's really,
yeah.
like general purpose classrooms, that's fairly clear cut. But then also looking at what spaces are being used not in their intended way or
Right.
whatever to accommodate these other
Yeah.
needs and sort of look at where the gaps are.
Yeah, if you get incremental, you're not going to know even what percentage that represents of what you already have, so.
And Bob, you had mentioned that we might talk about enrollment projections. I think it would be difficult for the department to say what we need in total if we don't know where enrollment's going, unless you want to say to them,
Only in that, when you're dealing with the MSBA, they're only going to give you what your enrollment is now. They don't even look at projections.
Well, that's not true. They only look at one methodology, which is birth rates.
But even when we did, it was whatever our enrollment was when we did Central School, they weren't looking at projections at all.
But I think we need to understand the ramifications of that.
It's good to understand it, but if you're going to get MSBA funding.
No, I understand.
right, so maybe you do needs with an enrollment projection, but then your funding is off of current enrollment or something, I don't know, but
Here's my monthly, you can get what you want. The MSBA is not the determiner of what you want. If you really want it, you can go to the towns and ask for it. They can fund part of it, but they're not determining what you want and what you need.
I think an example of that, when we had the building renovation, I remember the auditorium would not hold the entire student body. It was a smaller number. And even though we had, we wanted to have all students go to the auditorium, they wouldn't build it on that footprint. They had a smaller number that we had to use, which didn't make any sense to me, because if you wanted to put everyone in the auditorium, that wasn't an option.
They don't fund auditoriums anymore.
They do for high schools.
But I say that because I really want us to understand what we really need, because
Right.
then we say, okay, we get funded for some of the stuff we really need, and we really need to persuade our own constituencies that this other stuff we really need is worth paying for. And if you don't do that, then you're under the thumb of an organization which is a bureaucracy that is looking at a standard, and no single school is a standard thing, and we need to be able to deal with that.
That's a good point, because we have to define what we're gonna be.
So what does an enrollment projection mean exactly?
Well,
Okay, are we done with your
I'm
question?
sorry.
Oh, okay.
so it wasn't available for the agenda, but I did get today for our school committee presentation, NESDEC's enrollment projections.
Who's NESDEC?
NESDEC is New England School Development Council. It's a area professional development. They do a lot of different things for education, but it's a professional organization. One component of it is statistical analysis. They do lots of different statistical analysis. We, as part of our membership, we get this annually. So, he is gonna present at our school committee on next Wednesday. He's said that he'd be happy to come and talk to this group individually as well, but you're all obviously welcome to come to school committee.
Who's he?
The gentleman that we're working with is Don Kennedy,
And he's with NEAS?
NESDEC. I know it gets confusing. So, these are based on current cohort survival group analysis. So the first page is just an overview of where we are to this year, as is the back of that page. So you get into the projections on the beginning of page 2. That's not page 9, it's the second page. He'd be the first one to say, and want me to say, that while these are 10-year projections, it's really the first 3 years that he feels very strongly about that are accurate. Once you go beyond that, you're really just counting on the cohort survival, and because it's not a factor analysis, there are no other components to look at, like economic development, new housing developments, et cetera, that are factored into the economy. None of those things are factored into the mix. So, in a nutshell, this has our enrollment as a district going down over time, over that 10-year period, and looking at the high school itself, you can see that the classes dramatically go down. I'd say dramatically. At the start in 2009, grade 11 is 271. By 2019, the projection is down to 207. So.
But this doesn't look at housing turnover, it's just the bodies here now?
So he's going to talk more about that, but he does look at the sales of houses, and that's why he says the first 3 years are really because going beyond that, he can't really project much about the sales or the economy. So that's it again. The first 3 years, that's a piece of the puzzle that he's has a formula that he uses. If he feels like it's warranted, the sales based on the Warren report, which is the area common real estate report, sales and projection for sales for our 3 towns have been within the norm, and so he doesn't feel like there's anything on the horizon that's going to disrupt the growth, or in this case, the lack of growth.
And so he sees the total population of the high school and the school district in general declining.
But we got this same report
We get it every
last year.
Yeah, we get it
I
every
think
year.
we shared it with the group
Yeah.
in kind of,
For every 2 years. Yeah.
But, I mean, I know, I guess that it's their study, but I don't, kind of, but there's a general feeling that, the population next year may bump by 25, like, as an example, like,
Is that a bubble year?
Next year is not a bubble year in our 8th grade, no.
I think we have a couple of big classes coming up before.
We have a big sixth grade.
Our population
It's almost like
current
every 4
year
years.
is already greater than his population estimate for next year.
Right, when we look at that little box on the second page, it shows us going down. Third page, sorry. We're at 1080 something.
1063 is what that's.
And does that take into account like school choice and
This is all our, these are all our kids.
but the projections, like
These-
where he shows it going down?
These are DESI numbers, so this is just, these are DESI numbers, so this includes our school choice kids.
Does it assume a percentage, though, of school choice?
It doesn't.
Do you have several of the last 3 or 4 of these reports?
Sure.
That I could look at and then compare it to the actual results?
But is that why the numbers are going down, because it includes school choice?
They wouldn't record a policy change.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
He
Yeah.
doesn't know that there's a policy change in.
How does he
He's just
model
looking
that?
at straight enrollment as
He's just,
reported.
exactly, he's just looking at straight enrollment through DESI over the last few years.
Oh, he's not building an algorithm,
It's-
okay.
Yeah.
It's peculiar to me that he shows population going down, which assumes the number of births in the district is going to be going down.
That is a trend.
That is the trend. The expectation for the Commonwealth is that the overall school-age population is going to go down. What he's noticing is where the trend right now for enrollment growth is more of the urban centers and within the Beltway. Because if you look at real estate, you know, if you look at the top 10 real estate sales communities, they're all within urban centers. They're not the suburban communities.
This is a trend that they're seeing in a lot of suburban communities.
Right.
But the 495 corridor is the fastest corridor in the state. It's been growing more than 10% a decade for the last 3
Yeah, but I
decades.
don't think Metro West is part of that growth. I think it's north and south.
When you see, right, when you see planning, people in the planning world and where places are growing in the state, it's like this big red splotch going along
Right.
495 from Lowell all the way down to Fitchburg, not Fitchburg, but to Worcester and along 495.
Franklin, and places like that.
Yeah.
So Bob, I never bring my old stuff. I happen to this time, I don't know why, and I have the 2013
Yeah.
sheet. And they said for 2014-15, the high school population would be 1,003
Ooh.
on the last one.
60 out.
And on this one, it shows us at 1063.
Right, we've already exceeded. Well, but we've already exceeded next year's also, for the 15-16 year.
They didn't ever show us getting as high as 1,063 on the last set of projections all the way through 22-23.
Can I see that?
And I would tell you again, I stopped at part of the space thing, I just looked back the last 5 years and I looked at the number of withdrawals and the number of enrollments, and it's looking like we're netting about 25 kids a year.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to come in here tonight and ask the committee to formally vote a request to the school district, to the school committee, to have a population study done.
Would you be different than this?
Well,
Well, yeah, but it'd actually be people who go out and crunch the numbers instead of, what, can you talk more about what?
Well, at this, I've got to summarize some of my perspective on where we are as a committee. And it is that the school, as we sit here right now, is already overcrowded. It needs 6 regular classrooms, plain classrooms, and at least 1 science lab to deliver what should be delivered today.
For today.
And that for the future, predicting the future need for classrooms depends on 2 things. And one of them is an enrollment projection, which we do not have. Assume for a moment that there are no changes in curriculum, that the only thing we offer in the future is exactly whatever we're offering this year, how many more classrooms would we need? We don't know. Okay? Now, there's a flip side to that argument. Let's assume the population in the future stays stable. Let's assume there is no growth. We're going to need more classrooms because what is happening is there's greater diversity in the types of classes we're offering. That diversity is occurring outside of mathematics, English, and languages. So almost all of those classes need specialized spaces. So even if the population of the school stays stable, we're going to need more classrooms. When you take the prospect of greater enrollment, that's going to magnify your need for classrooms if you're also diversifying and expanding your curriculum. So there's two separate questions here, but each of them magnifies the problem of classrooms depending on which is your priority. And the simplest one to address, as I think for this committee, is the population one, and we don't have the authority to do anything. So I would like to have a formal request to the school committee for a population study that looks out, you know, if we're going to do something, we're going to borrow for 10 or 15 years, and I think the population study should go out for as long as the borrowing is going to go. So I would want a population study of the high school specifically, maybe the community schools, you know, as an auxiliary if they're going to crunch the numbers anyway. But a population study that goes up 15 to 20 years, so we can look at what the probable enrollment for the high school is likely to be.
Making a motion?
I'd rather discuss it before I make it a motion.
I think we should.
I think that I don't disagree with the idea. It may be premature. I think it'd be good to hear from Don and have him come in and talk to this group, and then see what we do.
I understand that. It's just we don't even have another meeting date set.
I think we do. I think it's April 16th.
Well, it's not in my calendar.
It's on our website.
Okay.
On the agenda.
All right.
Is it April 16th?
It's on the agenda.
Yeah. But I think, you know, that having a more factor analysis enrollment may be the direction to go. But I think, you know, to give NESDEC an opportunity to explain how they went ahead and developed these numbers would be, I think, the.
Well, they do say in their letters to this and previous ones of these, they say quite specifically and clearly, we take into no account, you know, growth, and we only look at births, and we look at, you know, the birth rate, and so that gives us, you know, a clear idea. I mean, they're putting out there saying these are the ways that it's inaccurate, because we decline to speculate about those things.
Well,
Which is a sane way to do it, but it also means that you can't rely on these numbers in a particular way, because you see what you get where you have a declining population when you have those assumptions.
the school committee wouldn't seriously consider that proposal till after this guy's presentation anyway.
What's
So we might as
the,
well wait.
Bob, what's the scope of that look like? What's the cost of something like that?
I have no idea.
When we did them for center school, they can get pricey. I remember, I'm thinking of the things, but I think we can get, you know, we're talking probably about somewhere in $10 to $15,000
Okay.
Well,
range.
let me
Especially if we narrowed it to the high school, I think that would make
let me speculate that we first met in December of 2013, well before the fiscal 15 budget was prepared. And as our timetable back then had us submitting a request to the MSBA for help, I don't think we were planning to sit on the project for 6 months. So my guess is that in the fiscal 15 budget, there's some money for architects and studies and stuff like that. And I I think we could use that.
Huh, is there money in there for that?
Nothing's set aside.
See?
Nothing's set aside.
No?
We didn't itemize a line for it.
Okay.
Where would it be then?
Well, if they can do a study of just the high school, that's my requirement, but.
There is this budgetary tradition where there's more than a few $100,000 of surplus every year.
Oh, God, please don't.
Let's not go there.
10 of those
It's gonna be
usually, but
millions.
I hear that this year it's going to be less, and I take that advice. I think if there's a will, there's a way, if there's a collective desire to make something happen.
Okay. I guess I'm comfortable waiting until after the presentation to the school committee. And when is that supposed to be?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
Yeah.
Are you gonna go?
I don't know. That's what I'm looking at. That's the 25th?
And he's more than welcome. He said he just couldn't come today because he just gave these to me today. But he'd be willing to come to this group.
Do you want to just ask him to come to this group on the 16th of April?
I hate to have him do it again, but that's just because I'm selfish and we're gonna be there, three of us will be there. Nobody wants to go to school committee meeting, it might be able to solve.
I've got another commitment, but I don't know if I can make the school committee.
Is it also taped? So
Yes.
if it
It
were
is,
taped, we could watch it?
But you can't ask
Then
questions.
you can't ask questions.
And he'll be constrained to a
Well, I
short
can ask,
talk,
but
probably too.
You're not gonna get a
my
reply
dogs are
back.
gonna sit there going, we don't know either, you know.
I'll need you.
But at the same time, we also know that even just looking back 1 year, that some of the factors,
Discrepancy.
that made like
Yeah.
a 60 or 80, person discrepancy, which has a big ripple effect in
Right.
the rooms and all that other stuff, so.
Yeah, that's what makes me a little uncomfortable about it.
Well, I think he just is upfront and saying, we don't factor these things in, which is fine, he didn't factor those things in, but
That's-
it's also fine to kind of say, well, we'd like a study that does factor those things in.
So that's gonna be really important for the rest of the school committee members to understand is.
Oh, he's right in front about that.
Oh, no, I'm sure he's not hiding it, but you know how sometimes people like to take the.
It's gospel.
What?
It's gospel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without thinking through, not
Yeah.
that there aren't thinking people, but you know what I mean?
Even his own 3-year estimate of that's where the numbers he has more confidence in,
Mm-hmm.
going back 1 year,
Yeah.
kind of, there was a pretty big discrepancy.
Yeah,
in
I
that
think we
1
gotta
year.
listen to what he has to say, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have to make sure we said.
Well,
we've
at
done
least
our due diligence.
I put this idea on the table so people can
No, I think it's a good
ponder it and,
Yeah.
you know.
And you know how I
Think
feel
we
about,
should do it.
studies and consultants but I think you look inside first, see what, and that means this guy, and then, because I'm really interested in this.
Yeah,
What you
I just
suggested.
don't know any other way to crack that nut except to hire someone outside of
Who's an
the
expert at
district
it, yeah.
and who's
Yeah.
done this before.
Yeah.
He's not a district employee.
No, I understand that. No, I know, but I just.
But he represents the state, he's working for the state?
but-
No, this is a private organization.
He's got a limited methodology.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's the answer then,
Yeah, he's got a limited methodology, so.
But we
They,
should
they will do, this is a stock opportunity as part of our membership.
yeah.
They actually can do the more advanced study. They do that as well. And many of the building projects that I've been involved in have had that do that, and they do it. You just have to pay more.
So I would be interested to hear what he has to say about this and the caveats. And then,
Could you post the letter that accompanies this in a prior year? Because that's really not going to change much, his methodology.
I have, I think with another document, he's supposed to give me a letter to the
Right.
school committee for this year.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
because Lorraine, that letter really lays out what they do and do not look at.
Which letter, I'm sorry?
There's a letter accompanying this saying what their
I don't have it
methodology
with me,
is, and with a strong caveat about
If you could just
what
circulate
it
that.
really looks at and what it doesn't. And
Is it in the, is it, where is it?
Yeah, there are two sets. So this is a set of looking at our district numbers, and then we have another one that is for each of the towns.
Oh,
And I think he's got a summary letter that goes with that one. I
is
just
it in
haven't
a
hit it.
packet? How did you find it?
It's
in past years
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, it's
We've
designed-
done this
They do
before.
this every year, so they have an identical caveat letter that goes with it. It says, these are the things we don't look
Well,
at.
I'll
but
make sure
this
it's in our
sounds like,
packet.
this sounds like it's his, templated one.
Yeah.
Like, this is
Yeah.
probably
Oh,
the
yeah.
lead to generate the next right?
Right.
We all do that. Right, Dave? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't fault somebody for this. It is what it is. But I do like the idea of, I mean, the data, this, I still can't, this is the best document that's come out of this past year and a half.
So for our April meeting, yeah, again, I'd like to have that guy come in and speak. I'd like to get on the agenda to go over my proposal for a second interim report.
Oh, yeah. Can I have my copy back?
I'll bring it over.
Thanks.
And,
So do you want us all, so we're still, all right, I have a question.
That need to be made, right?
what's that?
There's a few edits need to be made.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
Should we email you?
Yeah, if
Do
you
it
have any,
next
if you have any,
time.
well, the ones that we discussed around the science labs, I wrote down. If you have other corrections, and if anybody has any questions about the document, just
you
go ahead
have,
and
I
call me.
have your corrections.
And
Give it
did,
back.
No,
and
It
some
might be
of,
my handwriting,
No.
if it's red.
some of that, Bob, came from Harry's first go through with his
Yeah.
needs summary. Are you gonna add in the needs summary that he went through tonight? Like, will we get child development in there?
I could, well,
Is that really an interim report? Is that what we want to call that?
well,
I mean, it's more
What I
than
was-
that. don't you think?
Progress report.
Progress?
what I'm really trying to do here is nail down what we agree we know.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
That's what I'm, and then say, and here's the stuff we don't know. Because we've covered a lot of ground since December. So I'm just trying to nail down, what do we agree on?
Yeah.
And are there any conclusions from that, and then where do we have to go next? So I could do an updated revision of this, sure, I just, you know, when I send it out, I just hope people realize it's not gonna be a substantial difference than this one, so that if they read one or the other, they'll be equally
I
prepared.
thought it was good.
I guess the other question I would have, ask people to consider about how we might address, and we don't need to come up with an answer for this is, but how do we look forward to what kinds of curriculum changes are going to occur or are going to be needed? Or how should those decisions be made? And how do you possibly allocate space to those?
You draw a line. Do you ever say no?
Does the decision, though, that typically, in my experience, is done during a building project. So I'm wondering if one of the steps, and as a result of the next report, if we have to have some sort of decision consensus of this group as a recommendation, that there is a need that needs to be addressed, whatever that is, and then we move forward with how that's going to be addressed. Because some of that work, I think, actually should be facilitated by somebody who knows something about aligning space with curriculum needs, which
Well, now we're back
nobody around
to-
this table has.
Now we're back to what are we going to be, in the direction that we need, because if we are comprehensive, as you say, this school would be huge. I mean, the need would be huge. So what Bob was talking about makes a lot of sense in gearing it down.
Well, I don't even know how we'd answer that question. You know, is this a question for this committee? Is this a question for the school committee? Does this properly belong with the building committee? I don't even know the answer to that right now. But
'Cause you have to
I
put
think, I
someone
mean,
that's-
if we're not going to address it, I think we should consciously say, we're not going to address it, as opposed to just leaving it hanging. Or if we think it should be dealt with by a certain group, we should say, you know, or if we decide we are going to deal with it, you know, let's go down that
I
path.
don't think it belongs in this group.
I'm not looking to solve it tonight.
And I have to tell you truthfully, based on the work that's been done, I think this group could do it. And I think this group could do a good job of it, but I don't think that that's the right place for it.
And again, all I'm trying to do is get it on the table, so if I bring it up in April, no one's heard it for the first time then. That's my only reason for bringing it up.
I have a question on meetings, and I don't feel that you have to agree or disagree, but do we want to wait another month? I mean, I have meetings at the wazoo, and I know everybody else does, and you guys put in a full day, and then you travel all over the place in a train and then come here, but do we want to wait a month, or do we want to try to expedite this? And we don't have to do this publicly if we don't want to, but I would prefer, and I could be overruled easily, and I'm good with that, to not wait a full month, because I think we have some wonderful momentum. But, you know, don't feel committed.
I would like to meet before the 16th. If our only agenda item is the interim report.
Agreed.
I don't think we're going to vote on it the next time we meet. I think what I would like to do with this is just go over it and make sure that what I think, sometimes I get wrapped up in stuff and it makes perfect sense to me, but when someone else reads it, it's like, huh? And I'd like to go over this report with everybody to make sure that every paragraph means to everybody else what I think it means. And then answer any questions, collect any more information so that we can vote on another interim report.
And I agree with all that, with this one item, I guess. If we're gonna go through it in a meeting, I still think it works better putting it up on the screen. If you're gonna make changes, and you do vote on it, because
I brought the PCs
Yeah.
because
because I think one of the things that happens is you kind of get to an agreement that people see and you're like, I'm gonna make these edits, and then you kind of redo all the same stuff at the next meeting because there's people kind of going through it and kind of
I heard
it's kind of
I heard you say that at the last meeting, so I
no
brought a
appreciate you
laptop,
bringing the
just
laptop.
plug it in and
Yeah,
we
no.
can go. And I would do that again.
April 2nd is 2 weeks. Would folks like to do that?
I can, but there's many other people. Pardon?
We have Tri-Town April 1.
Oh, jeez.
Appropriately enough.
Oh, God! Oh, do I have to go?
What's the hot topic?
April 1.
Haven't seen the agenda yet. Open.
Is it back at Stowe?
Yes.
Do you want to do March 30th,
TV.
that Monday night? So you're not meetings back to back?
I can't do the 30th.
Okay.
but-
I'll make it happen, I think. Oh, that's right before, oh, I can't, I'm sorry. That's, Holy Thursday, and I have to go to Mass, I'm sorry.
That's right.
My son's serving, sorry.
That's the second, you mean?
Yeah,
second.
it's Monday, Thursday.
What about that Tuesday?
Friday?
Oh, definitely not Friday. Hello? Thank you. Why don't you come to church with me? I think you need it.
Those wandering sheep.
Yeah. Monday, you say? Oh, Michael can't do it.
Tuesday?
Tuesday the 31st?
I can do that.
That works for me.
How do
can
others
do
feel,
that.
Maureen? Maureen, please.
Well, how is, oh yeah, okay, it gets us away from Holy Thursday. I was gonna say, how is Tuesday, Wednesday better than Wednesday, Thursday, or back to back?
I mean, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. I mean, I'm only one
like, so
person.
sure,
If
I
all the
can
rest of
make
you
it.
heathens can make it on Thursday, you should do it.
I won't be here Thursday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I
You mean pagan
am
rituals?
actively participating.
Tuesday works for me, the 31st.
Tuesday works.
Can you do it?
Yeah, I
Can
have
you
no
do it?
life.
And administration folk?
Ed?
That works for me.
Is that not a selectman night for you?
Second and fourth Tuesday.
Sounds like a date.
All right.
All right, you're gonna get the, that's my favorite topic. Even though you're making only slight variations to this, can you label down at the bottom, interim report to draft 2?
Oh,
Sure.
So we'll know it
that's a good
differs from
idea.
this one if you had it.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
That's a
Yeah.
good idea.
And you get it out so
James,
we
are
can
you
have
available, or
a
is your
chance to
brother?
look at it.
You know, there's a revision number up at the top left. That will change. That's how I was gonna track that stuff.
Okay.
All right.
Fine.
Is that good for you?
You can get it out to us as soon as it's ready, so we'll have time to look it over before the 31st.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Alita sent this one out, but the next one will have just some minor changes to it. That incorporates some of Perry's comments from tonight.
So just lastly, for some reason that file on the minutes is corrupted. I couldn't open that file.
Okay.
And I tried a couple of different
Okay.
folders, so if you could resend that, I
Sure.
apologize.
Sure.
Great meeting, everybody. Thank
Thanks
you.
for all the
All right.
work. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Yes.
it.
Thank you.